Hello and welcome to episode 177 of the Pitcher or the Hitter, the podcast by the M-SABR Dynasty League for the M-SABR Dynasty League. I am Cam,
I'm Sahil.
and for the fifth year in a row, we are recapping a first-year player draft in our league. That is crazy. We've done seven of these now in our league, the fifth one in the podcast era, um, and this was a fun one. I gotta say, I thought this was a very exciting, very intriguing draft.
Yeah, it's always exciting to do the draft. Never gets old. Always one of my favorite days of the season, or off season, I should say. Then again, Dynasty is a full year-round sport, so it is in the season. But yeah, it was certainly a fun draft day. A lot of interesting picks, a lot of interesting trades. Unlike last year, we didn't do as great of a job picking the first round, so that meant more surprises for us, which I was really excited about. And man, this was kind of a lot of twists and turns. But
Yeah, I feel like there was so there I feel it feels like there were three tiers of players. There was tier one was picks 1 through 13. I think we all kind of knew that those are going to be the first 13 players taken, and the order was a little bit surprising. But we all kind of knew there was a drop off there. After that, it was picks, yeah, 14 through 20, 14 through 28, I think was the second tier. I think we all kind of knew that those were the players that were going to be taken in those picks, just in a different order, but there weren't any surprises of anyone who was taken there. I mean, I think there were some people who were surprised at where they went, but there's no one. I think that was a tier. And I'll talk about kind of what happened after pick 28 there once we get to that. But after that, it was just kind of the third tier was just kind of wild card. There was a guy I hadn't heard of. There was um, some some interesting picks there, but a lot of wild cards. But yeah, I feel like yeah, three tiers for sure.
yeah, no, I think you were absolutely right about that. Not as deep of a draft as some of the prior drafts, and I think we made that pretty clear in our draft preview episode, but still interesting nonetheless. And I think a lot of teams got better. But are we ready to dive in?
Yeah, let's do it. And yeah, one team for sure. I think we're in agreement, and we'll talk about this at the end as to who was the best, who had the best draft this year. Um, i.e. the which award is that? That would be um
Our awards.
the Jose Peraza Award winner. I think we are in agreement for who that is. The Kyler Murray Award for best moment. I think we've got some options. I don't think we've decided on that, so that could be interesting. But yeah, let's dive in here. Before we do, yeah, the first things that happened on trade or on draft day were a couple of trades. You Let's kind of bang these two deals out before we get into the draft itself. So you traded Moises Chase to Yuki for David Festa, prospect pitcher for prospect pitcher. Um, I don't know a ton about either of these guys, so why don't you break them down?
Yeah, Moises, I don't know if it's Chase or Chase, but he was actually an Orioles prospect that was traded to the Phillies in the Gregory Soto deal at the trade deadline. And I think the Orioles are going to live to regret that. Soto actually settled in after a rough first couple outings, so I think he's going to be pretty solid in the bullpen for the Orioles. But I do think Chase, his whole thing is control. If he can limit the walks, I think he has a chance to be a very good starting pitcher in the majors. But if he can't do that, I think at the very least he is gonna be in a major league bullpen. I think it's the type of arm where if you're a team like Yuki, who is trying to retool a bit, I think he's kind of worth having. David Festa, on the other hand, is ironically also the type of arm that I think Yuki should have, but he's an interesting one. So he came into the season kind of with some a little bit of prospect pedigree. I think, he was being kind of looked at as, maybe like a top 100-ish prospect. And he had a really I think kind of underrated season. So his first two starts not very good. But after that, he really settled in. He had in the time between his um, third start, which was on um, July 24th, to the end of the season, of all pitchers who pitched, I think it was at least 50 innings was the threshold that I had set to look at this. Um, he had the third highest K per nine, only behind one of them was my boy Spencer Arrighetti. Um, so there's a lot of arm talent there. I think there are some question marks though. He does have a three pitch mix, but he only uses two of them against righties and two of them against the lefties. So he's a little more predictable. Um, and he did have some issues pitching deep into games. The pitch count will get up. He does have some control issues. So I think he's a really interesting arm. I do have some concerns that he could potentially end up in a bullpen. But for me, when I was making this trade, I was like, a lot of what I'm saying about Chase is what I'm saying about Festa right now, and Festa's already made it to the majors, so that was a difference for me. And I also kind of thought that Festa could be an interesting trade chip, as we'll get to later, because I no longer own him.
Yeah, no, I think that's certainly fair. Um, Festa's an interesting guy. He had an interesting 2024. The peripherals look solid. Um, the slider looks really good. Um, just kind of looking at the numbers. Yeah, I think he's a decent guy to bank on if you're a team that's, well, if you're Yuki, like you said, or if Arya, again, you no longer own him. But yeah, I think he's interesting. Um, yeah, the Twins seem to have a lot of these guys. Louis Varland was one that I bought into. They have a lot of like breakout candidate guys, it seems. Some of them turn into Bailey Ober and they do break out. Some of them turn into Louis Varland and do not break out. We'll see what David Vesta is.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But yeah, let's dive into the second trade here. I traded Ozzy Albies to Alex for Jarren Duran. And I'd love to hear your thoughts first because you had kind of a different reaction than I thought you were when I made the trade.
Yeah, so this kind of shocked me. I feel like you've been feeling thin at second base this offseason after trading Altuve. Um, Albies has been kind of one of your guys. Um, and this season wasn't the best for him. He had some injuries, but it is kind of surprising to see you trade him for someone that you have kind of outspokenly not liked in the past. I feel like Jarren Duran, and he had a better season. He did kind of have a breakout season, but I'm not really sure I buy it. The BABIP run are super high. He did steal some bases, but I don't know. I look at him and I just don't feel like I buy it. Um, and he is, as a matter of fact, he is older than Ozzy Albies. He's been, even though Albies has been in the league since 2017 and Duran has been in the league since 2021. Um, so it's not like you're getting younger there necessarily, but I don't know. I guess like looking at the numbers, I get why you would do it, but it feels kind of surprising and it feels, yeah, I'm maybe not the biggest believer in Jarren Duran.
Yeah, so I'm I kind of had the opposite reaction. So breaking down Ozzy Albies, there's a couple things here that have concerned me. He has only put up six 600 or more. Actually, let's see. Let's do it this way. He has only played 100 or more games 2 of the last 5 seasons. One of those was the COVID season, but in that COVID season, he didn't even play half of the games. He played 29 games. So he has just not shown an ability to stay healthy. The 2 seasons that he did have that were healthy were very solid seasons. But 2 of the last 3 seasons have really just been injury washout seasons that have not been good. And the Statcast pages aren't amazing. The sprint speed has kind of declined year over year. He was never hitting the ball particularly hard. I just like I think there's kind of a consensus among a lot of the rankings that I see where he's like a top 50 dynasty asset. And my concern is that, hey, he doesn't bounce back fully or he gets hurt again. And all of a sudden, it's like, well, three of the last 4 seasons look bad. And a trajectory starting to point even more downwards, which I think it's kind of pointing downwards now. Now, um, second base is shallow. I think there's really like 7 options, 8 options that I trust to be like my starting second baseman. I think it is arguably the thinnest position, and I've been spoiled at second base. I mean, last year at one point I had Mookie Betts and Jose Altuve and Ozzie Albies and Marcus Semien and Joey Ortiz and Jordan Westberg and Luis Garcia Jr. all eligible at second base on my roster. I mean, it was insane. I don't have that anymore, but. Um, I try not to get too caught up in the position. I'd rather get caught up in, who's a better player. And I think Jarren Duran is just a better player at this point in his career. He's gotten better year over year in a lot of the underlying metrics that I look at. The Statcast page looks a lot better. He has posted a higher barrel this past season. He had a higher barrel rate, hard hit rate, and sprint speed than any season in um, uh, Ozzy Albies' career, or close to it. I think the hard hit rate or barrel rate, there was one season where Albies matched it, but like I think Duran's just a better hitter. And then like when I look at the underlying statistics, I'm like, where is the regression coming from? Like, yeah, a 345 BABIP is high, but he also has a 90, he's also a 96 percentile sprint speed this season. So like he is just gonna run higher BABIPs. Even the 345 was a 40-point drop from the season before, and he had a better season. So that doesn't worry me too much. I think he has good plate discipline, he has good quality of contact. So like yeah, if you're gonna tell me, hey, he doesn't hit 21 home runs next year, like you think he's going to hit more like 17, 18, fine. I'm not really like, going to lose too much sleep over that. But the flip side of that is he was one of the league leaders in doubles last year. That's a category for us that's important. So if a couple of those home runs are turning into doubles, for example, like I'm not going to lose sleep over that. He scored 111 runs. I think he's going to bat atop a Boston lineup that is improving. Roman Anthony, Christian Campbell, those types of guys are going to be up early this year. A lot of the other younger guys that they have are going to have more experience under their belts. Trevor Story should be hopefully healthy for the full season. Tristan Casas, it's not too late for them to go get a Bregman or an Arenado. So I think from an accounting stats perspective, I don't see why he can't match uh, or get close to the 111 runs, 75 RBIs again. 342 OBP is better than pretty much anything Albies has done recently. So I, I've also just and I don't want to use other people's rankings, but like I have yet to find a dynasty or seasonal ranking that put Albies ahead of Duran. Like I just think he's a better player, and I'm happy to have him. So you know I can work around the roster construction aspect of it, and I already have to some degree.
Well, that is certainly interesting. We will see, yeah, if Albies bounces back or if Duran continues to regress. Um,
I will say one more thing, and then we can move on. This isn't anti-Albies. I think Albies is going to have a very good season, and I think Alex got a really good player. And I think from Alex's perspective, you are gambling on that track record as opposed to like maybe Duran being, um, somebody who just kind of peaked this season and there's going to inevitably be decline. And I don't think you're the only person who shares that sentiment, which is why I think it is a pretty good trade for both sides. But I'm just more of a believer in the skills. But I do get the other side of this, and I do think Alex comes off pretty well here too. So
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. But are we ready to get into the draft?
yeah, let's get into the draft. So Alex took Roki Sasaki with the first overall pick. That wasn't a surprise. What I do think is interesting is there was a crap ton of trade talk around that first overall pick. I think I spent the entire day last Tuesday just like on the phone with Alex, like negotiating a trade for that pick. And I know I'm not the only one. I know Andrew chatted me at one point, and I was like, "Well, is there anything I can do like trade wise, with you to kind of help?" And he's like, "Yeah." He's like, "Pull your offer for Sasaki from Alex." Um, and I feel like there are times where Alex was considering trading Sasaki, and as a matter of a fact, like at least for me, Sasaki and Duran were packaged in a lot of the deals that I was talking about with Alex before we settled on the simplest version of this, which was just Albies for Duran. Um, I know Andrew had an offer centered around Schwarber and Tanner Bybee for Sasaki and something else. Um, so like I feel like Alex was shopping that pick pretty heavily towards the end there. I'm not surprised he didn't trade the pick. I think Sasaki was the right pick for him and the starting pitcher that he should build around. I think it's a nice 1-2 punch with Gilbert, but it was really fun to kind of see the rush around that pick to see if somebody else could acquire it because it's not the first time the number one overall pick was traded on draft day. So I thought it was really interesting, and I kind of enjoyed seeing that rush.
That is crazy. I was not aware that that had happened. I joined the draft around pick three or four. Um, but yeah, I remember there being talk earlier. Alex ended up keeping all three of its first round picks, which I think we would have going into the draft if we were picking. I think we would have picked that he would have traded one of them, but he did end up keeping all three of them, and he kept one and got a great pitcher.
Yeah, I know he did have offers for a couple of the other picks as well, 4 and 5, but he really decided to hang on. Um, I thought he made some pretty good picks, and we'll get to 4 and 5 in a minute, but it was certainly interesting that Sasaki was as available as he was.
Yeah, absolutely. Pick number two, Yuki took Travis Bazzana. I don't really have a ton to say about this. Um, he's the right pick, but yeah, it's not often second basemen go this high in the
Yes.
draft. It's really only been Nick Madrigal and Termar Johnson who have come top three, but Bazzana I think was the easy pick and the right pick.
Yeah, I think he was the best of this year's domestic crop. I think he's definitely a cut above Madrigal and Termar Johnson when they were drafted. I think this is a solid pick for Yuki. He made the right pick. I do have access to a mock draft that Yuki did do. And Yuki had him going second overall in his mock to him. So, despite what Yuki had chatted to me and I'd mentioned on the pod about Yuki saying that he thought Sasaki might slip, I think he accurately predicted that he would end up with Bazana. And I think this is a really good pick for Yuki. I've no beef with it. I didn't hear about any trade talks of this pick, so I think this is just kind of pretty straightforward.
I did not either. Daniel and Matt picked three. We had some other thoughts with this pick. We thought they would take Condon, but we they ended up picking JJ Weatherholt, and I think that was the right pick.
Yeah, I think it's the right pick. I had him third on my board. I'm a big Weatherholt fan. I think that he'll be up pretty quickly for the Cardinals and take over one of those infield spots. Maybe not shortstop with Mason Wynn there, but I think he could settle on the second base long term for them. Maybe third. I don't know what his arm is like, and just be a really solid contributor. So I think good pick for Daniel and Matt. Yeah, I think the intrigue really starts with the next pick, or the next two picks, we'll group them together. So Alex took Chase Burns, and then he took Cam Smith. Um, And in the mock, we gave him Weatherholt and Kurtz. We thought those were kind of the two last players in a tier to drop. But we did talk about how we thought that, he could take Chase Burns if he wanted a pitcher. And sure enough, he took Chase Burns. Uh, and then he took Cam Smith, which I think some people thought was a surprise with Nick Kurtz on the board. But I don't know what you think, but I really like both of those picks. I think Cam Smith's a really solid prospect, and I mean I know you like Chase Burns, the Reds fan. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I like these guys. I think this is definitely higher than I would have taken either of them. Um, I feel like, every year I come away thinking, Alex reached on some of these guys, and every year it turns out to be wrong. And and it's hard to not feel again, this draft's like, oh, Alex reached on some of these guys. But, Cam Smith, um, he's a fast riser for sure. He could be up in the majors this year. Um, for the Astros, drafted by the Cubs, but is currently on the Astros. And then, yeah, Chase Burns, he's a solid pitcher. He is the best pitcher available, and um, I definitely don't blame him for getting the best pitcher, even if I would have waited a little bit longer to take a pitcher.
Yeah, I think while a lot of people thought that Kurtz was kind of maybe in a little bit of a tier above, um, I don't think it was like, I feel like there have been years where there's just been such a clear like delineation between like that top tier of domestic guys and that second tier. I don't think it was as steep this year, and I do get the concerns that some people have about Nick Kurtz. So, um, and it is a first base only profile, right? We talked about that. There's not a great history of first baseman being drafted. I know we talked about how Alex kind of wants a young first baseman. He does have Samuel Basallo, and I think that's kind of the guy that he is really gambling on moving forward. So I'm okay with how this ended up for him, and I trust the research that he did. It did create an interesting decision at six. Um, I know Ruthvik really took the time to shop the pick. He had alluded to at the time, he was like, hey, there's one guy who I think everybody really wants. Um, and he did shop the pick, but he ultimately made the pick, Nick Kurtz. There was, before we talk about it, um, Yuki mentioned that he almost traded or he offered Isaac Paredes to Ruthvik for this pick, but Ruthvik never responded to him, evidently.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's Paredes and Houston, I think, is going to be a little more interesting than he was last year in Chicago. But yeah, is he worth Nick Kurtz? I'm not sure, but I thought this was the correct pick for Ruthvik. I don't really know what else he was offered. Um, but on its face, I think this is the right decision.
Yeah, I was one of the people who was in on this pick once I saw Kurtz was going to be available. This was kind of so I had some plans going into this draft. I considered, or this had been kind of a if Kurtz is there or if Weatherholt is for some reason there at six, I will try to trade up. I didn't really have the most competitive offer. I was offering eight plus some lower level of my prospects. It wasn't really something that he had to think too much about though, and he ended up keeping the pick.
Ah, that's fair. No, I mean, I think it was the right decision for him. Can't blame him for doing what he did.
hmm and yes, let's and yeah, he's got a big power hitter there. Moving on to Connor. To the surprise of no one, he took Hagen Smith, the top White Sox.
Yeah, so for those of you who weren't on the call, or for those of you who forget, Andrew and I had a bit of a running chat through the call, and I really appreciated that. We had some fun conversation here, but I want to see if I can find quickly what he said about Hagen Smith. He said, quote, I'll eat my left leg on camera if Connor doesn't take Hagen Smith. So Connor thankfully took Hagen Smith, so Andrew has both of his legs. Um, Now Connor actually discussed the pick a little bit on the call. He mentioned that he actually watched Hagen Smith in person. It wasn't just a homer pick, but he'd been able to scout him in person a bit and ultimately reached the conclusion that he was a correct pick. And honestly, I think this was the appropriate range for him to go. I know Hagen Smith's gotten a lot of hype. I've even seen some people who think that he was better than Burns or at least in kind of the same tier as Burns, kind of a 1A, 1B situation. So I
I
have no
certainly remember prior to the draft, prior to the real life draft, Hagen Smith was a name that I knew better than Chase Burns.
interesting. I did not know that. I knew Chase Burns a bit being down in North Carolina at the time, and he was a big conversation at Wake. But Um, yeah, I think Connor got a really good pick here. I mean, he needs help all over that team, and they get a top young pitcher. Hard to dispute that.
All right, but let's move on to number eight. And this was one of mine. And I think there was a lot of intrigue behind this pick. I'm not sure how much you were in on it, but I I was definitely shopping this. I kind of felt going into the draft, Braden Montgomery is my guy, but I don't need to take him at eight. So I considered, I kind of set up some targets. I figured, trading back to either 9 or 12 or 10 would kind of be, um, and I had some deals mocked up. That being said, um, when Charlie Condon was available at 8, it definitely did make me think a lot. And I like Condon, but I had him fifth on my board. He was even under the run to the podium category. I was not expecting him to be available at 8. He's definitely got some concerns. Like he's got some swing and miss. He had a rough 2024 in the minors. But that being said, the potential is insane, off the charts. He hits the ball so hard, he's going to be playing at cores. Um, he was like like 6 months ago, we would have thought he would be the number one pick in this draft. So getting him at 8 feels great. I still did shop the pick though, because I still would have been happy with Braden Montgomery. Um, I had an offer out with Andrew. Uh, from 8 to 10. Um, I was very close to trading pick 8 for pick 10 and Ruthvik's second for next year. Um, he had to think about it for a while, but he decided to keep 10. He was a little disappointed, I believe, and you were talking to him a little bit more, but he seemed to be disappointed that I took Condon. He was kind of maybe gambling um, on me not taking him, but
Who,
uh,
Andrew, you said?
yeah, Andrew. Um,
Yeah.
that's what it seemed like at least. Um, but I did have an offer out there to trade back to 10, but I ended up taking Condon here. And um, yeah, that was pick 8.
Yeah, so it's interesting because I have Andrew's draft board, and Andrew did not have Charlie Condon above the guy that he took at 10, Christian Moore, um, or the guy that he almost took, the guy that won 10th overall. And we'll talk about why Andrew traded out of that pick. I think it's one of the more interesting um, um, decisions. But yeah, I think Condon at 8 was a really good price for you, right? I mean, obviously the talent's there. He smokes the ball. He's going to play in cores. I think there are the pieces there for him to be successful, but he did struggle, right? A bit after he got drafted. I do get some of the concerns about his profile, so. I get why he slipped, but I talked about in the last episode all the reasons why I thought Condon going late was a good pick, and it ended up being correct. So,
Yeah, I
um,
agree. Like I would have
I
been
mean,
nervous taking him at 5 or so, but getting him at 8, I feel good about.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, pick 9. Daniel Matt took Jack Caglione. I kind of had him as an avoid on my board. Um, I'm not sure if you did, but this feels like about where I thought he would go. And in fact, this is where we mocked him.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think this is exactly kind of the range that I we thought he was going to go. I have no problems with this pick. This seemed pretty standard. I think like the guys who want 9 to 13 all kind of could have gone in whatever order here, and I wouldn't have been surprised. And I think yeah, I don't have a ton of thoughts on Caglione.
Certainly. Yeah, so pick 10, Andrew originally on this pick. Um, I was in his DMs for that pick saying, hey, you wanted Condon. And at the time, I thought he wanted Condon. Why don't we do like a reverse Yohandi here? I trade you I trade you Condon for this pick in that second rounder. Um, he really did think about it. He did tell me at this point that Condon was behind Christian Moore on his board. And then, so then I told him, well, if I told him, well, why haven't you taken Christian Moore yet? Um, and why haven't you shut these talks down yet? And so it's definitely something that I think he still considered. In the end, though, he traded this pick to Ruthvik for Bobby Miller.
Yeah, this kind of came out of left field. So I know that Ruthvik was shopping Bobby Miller. I thought Andrew gave me some indication before the draft and during the draft that he really liked Christian Moore. And I think what he kind of said during the draft was his biggest fear about Christian Moore was that he was kind of looking at it and into Christian Moore and thinking, is this just Nolan Gorman 2.0? And I know he hasn't had the best of experiences with Nolan Gorman. And yeah, it kind of caused him to want to move the pick. And then I think from his perspective, right, like he could get a guy who's had major league success in that Dodgers rotation, Bobby Miller. I personally think his struggles last year were pretty solely attributed to the injury. I don't think it was some major skills decline or something. Um, but like I don't know where to room this for Bobby Miller in the rotation necessarily. I mean, maybe early on in the season, right, with Shohei probably not being ready to pitch immediately at the start of the season, but and I'm sure some of these guys are going to get injured, but I think there is some risk there. I know Ruthvik is really eager to get off of Bobby Miller because I think Ruthvik didn't really see where Bobby Miller had the rotation space, and I think he was worried that he might eventually have to cut him. But I think from a pure talent perspective, I get why Andrew made this trade, and I we could easily look back at this in a year and be like, man, Andrew really bought low on Bobby Miller, and he did a great job of being able to do that. So.
I could certainly see that. I think Bobby Miller needs to get traded from the Dodgers before we're saying that. But I um, I agree. In the meantime, though, I really do like this trade for Ruthvik a lot, and he got Christian Moore. And Moore, he's kind of a safer bet. He's going to be in the majors very soon. Is the ceiling super high? I don't know. He's got some power. Um, he's a guy that I definitely would have been happy to take with my pick. But yeah, there are definitely the concerns there. There's the concerns, is he Nolan Gorman? There's the concerns about the ceiling. Um, but I think he's a good pick at 10.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, I think there's a group of 9 to 13 of guys that I thought were going to be there. I know Moore as a fact was higher on some teams' boards. So I think for Ruthvik to get him here at 10 was a pretty good deal. Um,
I will say I had him 7.
yeah, I did see team have him as high as fourth on their board.
Hmm,
So um,
man. That is crazy. So moving on, and the way we do, yeah, just kind of a heads up for our thing. We're not going to go pick by pick by pick here. What we do is we'll do the first round, and we'll include pick 13 because that's part of that tier, and 12 and 13 were both Jake. But we'll do the top 13 here. Then after that, we'll kind of do second round overview, one or two interesting guys, and then third round overview, one or two interesting guys. Um, but with that
yeah,
being, yeah, that being said, pick 11, Eric took Bryce Rayner. I believe that was Eric's first Tiger that he has taken in in the draft, and it is their first rounder from this year, shortstop Bryce Rainer.
Yeah, a really solid pick. I think Bryce Rainer could have a really nice future for the Tigers. Lord knows they need a shortstop. Yeah, I mean, Eric being a Tigers fan, I think this kind of lined up perfectly for him, and I think it was a no-brainer when he was on the board.
I agree. I wouldn't call it a no-brainer because there were two people that I had above Bryce Rainer. Both of Jake's picks I had higher on my board, but the Tigers thing will get guys drafted a little bit earlier. And he's still a solid pick. I like him.
Yeah, no, I think you hit the nail on the head. There were two guys who I really liked afterwards as well, and I mean, I think this is a good transition into Connor Griffin and Braden Montgomery.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think Jake did fantastic at the turn, and I mean these were the last two guys in a tier, so it's not terribly difficult. But I mean, I had Montgomery 6 and Griffin 8 on my board, so that is fantastic to get at the 12-13 turn. To talk to Griffin, I uh, think he could be. Um, he's just yeah, got super flashy tools. He's very fast. He hits the ball very hard. He's a high schooler. He plays um, just kind of up the middle defense. They're not really sure where he's going to land between shortstop or center field, but he could be either. Um, and he's just a guy that you can dream on.
Yeah. I mean, I think Connor Griffin. I saw a tweet that was like prospects that could potentially be the top overall prospect next year. Um, and like Connor Griffin was on that list. I think Travis Bassano was also on that list, and Connor Griffin was the only other person from this draft class that was. The upside's immensely high. The downside is also immensely high. I mean, it reminds me of your James Wood pick a couple years ago. Um, James Wood had all the upside in the world, big athletic guy. And it came together for you, at least so far. He obviously needs to prove it over a full season, but I think Connor Griffin could easily be the same. Or he could flame out. I mean, this isn't the first time that we've had big athletic guys who were drafted and they didn't quite pan out in this league. So we'll see. It's going to be interesting, but I think it's a good pick for Jake, especially at 12. And I think Brady Montgomery is just a very solid pick overall. He was one of my favorite players in this draft at the value that I thought he was going to go at. I think 13 is a really nice pick for him. I think you're right. He could have gone earlier, definitely higher on your boards, definitely higher on some other people's boards. I'm going to see if I can maybe find some of that. Uh,
Yeah, and I took him in Gyarados, and I was very happy with that pick. I even on my board I wrote, "This is probably your guy." I feel like I was higher on him than most, perhaps, but I think he's great. He's got some concerns with the chase, but he just hits the ball. He hits the ball really hard. He's a switch hitter. Um, I think he's a great pick for Jake.
yeah, the boards that I have access to, both teams had those two higher than 12 and 13 where they went. So,
Oh yeah.
um, yeah, yeah. So great picks. Yeah. Anything else we want to say about those top 13, or do we want to transition to our discussion of the second round?
Yeah, let's talk about the second round. This is right here is where it really opened up. Any of these guys that you want to kind of mention off the bat?
Yeah, let's uh dive into a couple of these guys. I It was a weird round, like, yeah, there was this like 14 through 28 kind of glob, but there wasn't really a ton differentiating them for me. I think it was more kind of a preference thing, and I think each kind of person had their guys that they liked. I did like quite a few of these picks here. I thought the Carson Bengay pick that Ruthvik made at 17 was very nice. I thought he could have gone a few picks earlier, honestly. Josuar Gonzalez, I thought that was interesting because we had kind of talked about him as going like 18th overall, like roughly thinking that's where he should go, and he ended up going 19. Um, the pick that was your pick ended up Cam got drafted there, so I thought that was fun. Um, and Yuki taking Yuki, or Tamayuki, I should say, at pick 24, I thought was interesting as well. For a team that needs a starting pitcher, I think he was able to get some nice depth there. I don't know if there's other picks that you wanted to talk about or any of the picks that I mentioned that you wanted to dive a little deeper into, but those are some of the ones that stood out to me in the second round.
Yeah, no, I think yeah, those are definitely interesting. Yeah, Tamayuki will be in the majors um to start the year, so that's always good. Um, I like Jake's Ryan Waldschmidt pick. I think Jake had a very good draft. Um, I am intrigued by Alex's pick of Durangelo Saintja. Um, he was kind of an avoid on my board as well. He's got the switch pitcher thing, but I just don't know if he's actually good. That's uh, I don't know. Um, he doesn't have good numbers. I'm worried that he's just kind of a gimmicky guy who rose up boards and was drafted early because of that. That being said, he's in a good spot in Seattle. Um, I think it's funny that Zane and Sully fully thought they sniped me on Cam. And I would have been very happy to take Cam. Um, but with Braylon Payne still on the board at 21, he was my actual 14th pick. He was my number one after that tier, after like the top 13. So um, getting him at 21 feels like a coup for me. He's he's a high school outfielder. It was a bit of a surprise when the Brewers took him at the time, but he has really looked great in like instructs and in a brief stint in the minors. Um, he's yeah, kind of a leadoff hitter type, but if he starts to elevate the ball more, he could be a 20 home run type of guy as an outfielder for the Brewers. So I'm very happy to get him. And I take it you're also very happy with your pick, Griffin Burkholder at 23.
Yeah, I think Burkholder is kind of another really just like high upside pick. I think he has a lot of the tools to be really successful. I don't usually love drafting high schoolers, but he uh has a lot of the tools that I'm looking for. Kind of just a good size, good hitting ability, good power that I think he could be a really special player. It did work for me last year with a Phillies um first round pick or I guess in Burkholder's pick. He was a second round pick. He was a 63rd overall pick, but the Phillies gave him the same bonus that they gave their first round pick. And I think there's a lot of people who actually like him better than their first round pick. Their first round pick wasn't even drafted in our draft, but um I think that he has a chance to become really solid. Um
Yes,
uh
no, I think that's fair. He is, um, he's Clegg's dude.
yeah.
And Aiden Miller was Clegg's dude last year, and that worked out for you. So um, we'll see if Griffin Burkholder's the same. Before we get into the third round, real quick, that night pick 19 that Ruth Vick took Joshua Gonzalez with, um, he acquired for Tyler O'Neill. Um, I don't have a ton to say about that, do you?
I I'll be honest, I really like this for Daniel and Matt because like Tyler O'Neill had a very solid season last year, and I kind of feel like Ruthvik could have done better. Like O'Neill's going to be 30 next year. He had a 131 WRC plus last year with 31 homers and only 473 plate appearances. And like, yeah, I get that the injuries have been an issue, right? I don't dispute that. And I get that, like, he's probably not going to play like 160 games in Baltimore. It's probably going to look more like 130, 140. Um, but like, I mean, even like Steamer projects him for like 25 homers, six steals, and a 317 OBP. Like, I think that's worth more than the 18th overall pick. That's just my feeling on it, especially coming off the season that he had. I think a lot of the underlying numbers on O'Neal have kind of improved year over year. I think it's really a question of health for him, and like I think he's gonna have a pretty solid year in Baltimore. They moved the fence in left field, which is gonna help him. So I don't know. This was a weird one to me.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think that's fair, and I like who Ruthvik took, but I agree. Yeah, Tyler O'Neill is solid, and he'll maybe be Daniel's best hitter already.
yeah, I mean, uh, I think these are the types of moves that he needs to make. He needs to make more of these, hey, find these kind of different value picks where, hey, maybe people are trying to dump players for one reason or another because they're coming off a bad season or have some injury concerns. And then when a couple of these guys pop up, maybe you could trade him for profit. Maybe a 30-year-old Tyler O'Neill's not going to be in their next winning team, but like if Tyler O'Neill has a really nice season, we all always know how thin the outfield can get when you have five outfielders and injuries pop up and so many outfield eligible players are used at different spots in the infield when they're dual eligible that everybody needs outfielders. And if O'Neill has a really hot start, maybe he flips him to get like a first round pick.
Yeah, um, I agree. And then the other trade, EBO, they got their Caminiti pick. They traded that, um, acquired it from Yuki for second rounder next year. Most it's your second rounder, so it'll probably be a late one, but um, Yuki maybe just decided he liked rather get a shot at next year than take one of these guys here, especially since he was already picking at 24.
Yeah. No, I mean I think it's a fine pick. I think Sagano is going to be competent. Uh, but I don't necessarily think that he is um, going to be a world beater or anything, but Yuki does need some rotation depth. So I don't mind to pick there. Um, Especially in a draft that wasn't super deep. And as we'll see as we transition into the third round, he kind of ran out of picks.
Yeah.
The only other thing I'll say that I think I forgot to mention was that I also tried to trade for 21 to take Braylon Payne, and you just had a better offer. So um,
Oh, so for 20 to get
20
Payne?
then. Yeah, sorry. 20, not sorry. I tried to trade for 20 to take Braylon Payne in front of you. And where instead EVO took Cam Caminiti.
Hmm. Yeah, no, Payne. Definitely, there were some people who wished he would fall to them. And speaking of people that they wish would fall, let's talk about the third round and pick 26, which I thought was one of the most interesting things in the draft. Connor said he was putting this pick on the block. Everyone realized, hey, Slade Caldwell's there. We like Slade Caldwell. He's awesome. He has not been taken, and like five or six teams reached out. There was a bidding war for pick 26, which I just find kind of great. I was one of the teams bidding. Yeah, there were yeah, a lot of teams in on this pick. I know I was one of them. I offered a future third, um, plus some prospect like Dylan Lesko. I threw in. I've since cut him, but put him in here. Connor said he wanted to trade out of the draft, and eventually I was outbid, and it was Andrew who got that pick and took Slade Caldwell as we all expected.
Yeah, it was kind of weird. I like kind of lumped him in with Ryan Walschmidt because they're both Arizona outfielders drafted, and I was like, oh shit, that pick's available. And I know Connor was shopping the pick, and it took me like 5 minutes with him being on the clock to really realize like, oh shit, like maybe I should, you know, trade for the pick. And ultimately, I mean, Andrew the best offer, so.
He did, and he took Caldwell. Um, yeah, the other pick that I wanted to mention here in this round, uh, Daniel and Matt took Ryan Sloan at 28. Um, and after that was everyone kind of checked out. Everyone, there were a lot of teams that kind of had me and Ruthvik and maybe a couple other people had Ryan Sloan as like the last guy on their board, and kind of decided, okay, Sloan's gone. I don't want to trade into the draft. I'm kind of done for the night. And yeah, he kind of felt like the last guy. possibly worth taking.
Yeah, that was my exact thought. Um, oh, anyone. I was like, shit, who else? I had one other guy in mind who I ended up taking, Vance Honeycutt, but just because he was an Oriole. But like, yeah, uh, I'll always be interested in a Mariners starting pitcher.
Yeah. No, and he is a solid one for sure. Um, he's a high school pitcher, which is a risky thing, but he's got easy velo. He's the type of guy that the Mariners go after, from what I'm hearing. He's kind of their type. So that is, someone that they think they can mold, and it's a good pick by Daniel.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head. Any anything from that 29 to 36 range that like any of these picks you really want to talk about? I mean, this
Yeah,
is
so
just
one thing I want to talk about, Ruth Vick traded pick 29 to Andrew for pick 30 and time to think because Ruth Vick didn't have anyone on his board. Um, Ruth Vick came back with the name PJ Morlando, and then Andrew took him. So Ruth Vick had to think again. Um, so I just thought that was fun. He eventually took White Sanford, whom he has since cut.
yeah.
Um, Other than that, though, no, I don't really have any thoughts. Pick 25, Seaver King is a decent pick. Um, Pick 27, Anthony took Sung Kim, um, Major League Ready guy. It's probably about where I thought he would go.
Yeah, I Kim was interesting. I don't think he's a high ceiling guy, but he is going to be playing second base a lot for a really good Dodgers team.
Hmm.
So like
Yeah, we'll see what the playing time looks like.
yeah, I thought about drafting him, and honestly, when I traded into the second round, he was the guy who was kind of on my board. I was considering there, but I was just like, I think I might just end up cutting him.
Mhm. But yeah, anything else about these picks before we kind of talk about the draft as a whole?
Did we mention the Hall of Fame condition for Orlando and Sanford?
No, I don't believe we did.
So I said on the call if both Orlando and Sanford end up in the Hall of Fame, I owe both Andrew and Ruth Vic a sody pop.
That is fun.
Yep.
Uh,
I do love now too that we have had two trades in league history where we've traded a pick for the pick that immediately came after that, just in a one for one.
I do love that. Yeah, that is fun. We do have fun trades, and that doesn't even include my Yohandi deal from last year, which I felt very savvy about, even if I have ended up cutting Yohandi. Um, but regardless, yeah. So that was the draft. This was the first draft. Just some couple notes here. This was the first time that no catchers were taken. There weren't really any good catchers, so that makes sense. But um, for the first time, no one took a catcher. 26 of 30 MLB teams were represented, and that does not include the Red Sox and Cubs, who had their first rounders taken, but they have since traded them away, Cam Smith um, and Brandon Montgomery. So really, 28 of 30 MLB teams, they drafted someone who we since drafted. It was only the Rangers and the who was the other team? I just had it up. Oh yeah, the Rangers and the Yankees were the only teams that no one was taken from, and in fact, there weren't any Yankees taken last year either. So 2 years in a row with no Yankees picked. That is a little bit surprising. Um, but yeah, so that is. Oh, the one other note that I had about this draft, there were 18 college players, 13 high schoolers, and 5 international people taken.
Interesting. I like that.
Yeah, anything else that you wanted to mention here before we kind of made some awards, before we picked our
Uh,
winners and called it an episode?
yeah. Nothing I can really think of. Oh, you know what? Well, two things. One, we need to pick the awards, but two, there is one more trade we need to talk about that happened after the draft.
Okay, let's
Um,
talk about that trade and then we'll give the um the Peraza and Murray awards.
Yeah, so I'm trying to pull up the details here. Yeah, so I traded Cedric Mullins, David Festa, and my 2032nd for Jake Berger and my 2033rd. Do you want me to give my thoughts first, or do you want to
Yeah, I
wait?
don't really have thoughts, so you can kind of go with them.
Sure. So, really hard to part with Cedric Mullins. But he's been losing playing time because he can't really hit lefties. He's batting lower in the lineup. Um, he was he was really good from like June to the end of the year last year. Like a 131, 136 WRC plus. Um, but he was really bad in April and May, just a little too inconsistent. And I had a lot of outfield depth after trading for Duran, and I desperately needed an infielder. I really like Jake Berger, and I did last year. This is the second off season in a row I'm acquiring him. Hopefully, I don't trade him away this time. Um, but there is a lot I feel like to like. So his strikeout rate has dropped year over year. It's now down. It was 30.6% in 22, his first full season, down to 25.9% last year. Um, all while maintaining really good power numbers. And while he wasn't quite as good last year on the surface, when you look at some of the numbers under the surface, he's arguably better. So his contact rates, his zone contact rate was up, his chase rate was down, his whiff percentage was down. So it was almost like he was becoming a little better plate discipline wise. And I feel like those are things that he can continue to carry over. I like to see a player who continues to improve. And I think being in a Rangers lineup, that's a significantly better lineup. I think I'll have more runs and RBI chances. And like, I don't see why you can't hit 30 to 35 home runs with really solid RBI numbers, really solid run totals. He's hit 250 like each of the last 3 years. He's probably going to do the same. And if he can get that OBP up even a little bit, I'd be happier. Like he had a 315 OBP over his Miami career. If he could do that over a full year, I'd be really happy. Although like Mullins wasn't a big OBP guy, so I'm not really it's not like I'm losing OBP points there. Um and I mean, I've already talked about Festa, so I don't really think there's much more to add, but I was really happy with this trade and it replenished my infield depth.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add other than Jake Berger is faster than Ronald Acuna,
Yeah.
um, which is crazy. He was a few ticks faster than him this year. And even in 2023, where Acuna stole 70 bases and Berger stole one, they had the same sprint speed. Um, so that is just kind of shocking. Both that Acuna is not as fast as you would think with given his stolen bases, and that Berger is a lot faster than you would think given his everything.
Yeah.
Um,
No, it is weird. He's a better athlete than he gets credit for. I also think he's a really good dude and just a really fun player to root for as a
mhm.
whole. So, yeah, he's going to be a fun one. Hopefully, I actually keep him around this time, and there's no uh starting pitcher I end up trading him for.
We will see. Yes, let's do these draft awards and get out of here. I think we are in agreement um, on the Jose Peraza Award for best draft. Is that right? Um,
Oh yeah, yeah, easily. Yeah. He
yeah.
had a
So
really nice draft.
yeah. So Ruthvik, um, he coming into this draft had made 8 picks ever, and he made 5 this year, and I like them. His third rounders are kind of, I don't care too much about those, but I mean, just looking at his top picks, getting Nick Kurtz at 6, getting Christian Moore at 10. He actually made six picks this draft. Um, yeah, Kurtz at six, Christian Moore at 10. Great picks there. Carson Bengi at 17, Joshua Gonzalez at 19. Both great picks. And then Sanford, I don't care about. Elian Pena, I don't care about. But that's really four solid picks. The only other person that stands out to me is Jake. I like his draft a lot, but I think Ruthvix is a cut above.
Yeah, I think Alex obviously made some nice picks too, getting Sasaki, Burns, and Smith, but I don't really want to reward him for having three of the top five picks. I think that's
Exactly.
a little cheap. I think it's kind of better to reward some of the people who had maybe later picks who I think got some really nice value. So
I
yeah, I
agree.
have
And I
no
will
issues with
say,
this. I think Ruthvik was
yeah,
the clear winner.
yeah, I agree. I will say I only made two picks, but I feel very good about my draft.
Yeah. Um No, I think you should. I think the Condon pick was really nice. And I think Braylon Payne, I mean, I was trying to trade for him, so clearly I think he's a good pick.
Certainly. And for draft moment, the Kyler Murray Award for best moment, we've got a few that were between um, it's Ruth Fix making trades. That felt like a through line through the draft. There's you trading Ozzy Albies. There's the bidding war for 26. Um, and one that I liked, two different teams didn't remember the name of the team they were trading with, which I thought was hilarious. You traded, um, what was it? Yeah, Daniel and Ruthvik made a trade. Ruthvik did not know the name of Daniel's team. And then uh, Ruthvik and Andrew made a team or
The trade.
trade. Well, I don't remember who. Yeah, made a trade, and Ruthvik didn't know the name of Andrew's team either. Um, maybe it wasn't the first one. It was the first one. Yeah, the first one was Daniel not knowing Ruthvik's team name, and then Ruthvik didn't know Andrew's team name. So I just think that was kind of fun here. Do you?
Also,
Yeah.
the funniest part of all of it that we didn't even t mention once was that, of course, when we did the draft, ESPN was down for maintenance, so it wasn't like we could just go and check
Yeah,
whose
he is.
team's names were who.
That is true. That could be a yeah, funny thing, top moment. Do you have any? There were some good draft moments here. Do you have a pick for the award? And we have to get out of here in a minute.
Uh, shit. You know what? I think I think the boring one is Albies for Duran. I think the fun one is one of the fun trades, and I'd say it's like the Orlando Sanford trade condition, and then like 29 being traded for 30.
That is fun. Let's do Albies for Duran, and if we decide we want to change it in the future, we will reserve the right to do that.
Yep. No, that sounds good. Well, if there's not anything else,
Um,
thanks for listening.
yeah, and we will be back next week with another episode, and we'll be back next year with another draft recap.
Yep. Until then.
Till then.
Yeah. No, absolutely. No, it was a very good pick. Which pick? Sorry, I missed that for a second. You're gonna have to and cut this out.
Uh,
Can you can you just say what you said first? Sorry, I got a notification.